questions at the end, please just post them on the chat. We'll collate them and we'll forward them to the presenter. And before or during the next session, we'll then put up the responses to the respective questions. So over to you, admin. Admin. Admin, there's no audio. Or is it from my end?
Have shaped the modern trials today of how today I'll present on history and the evolution of clinical trials. We'll see how some of the early experiments have shaped in the way we operate and run clinical research today from a medical ethical point of view. I want to thank the organization for this good opportunity to be here. It's an honor. I also want to thank IQVIA for looking at Africa and looking for ways to improve what we do. Thank you, everyone. What are the learning objectives for my presentation? I hope that by the end of my presentation, you get an understanding of how clinical research came to be. I also hope you get to see how key milestones have shaped the modern trials today, mostly experiments and research, and then get to understand the regulations and ethical codes and why they are. And hopefully you can learn some of the lessons I learned as well at the end of my presentation. The journey of clinical trial has been a fascinating one. Even though I feel like we are gradually moving back to that journey from the ancient beginnings. Today, you hear a lot of people trying herbal experiments and all that. So the history of clinical trial actually traces back the biblical descriptions back in the book of Daniel during the King Nebuchadnezzar era. And it was written that there was the king food and there were those feeding on vegetables and water. And they said to compare, and the hypothesis was that the king's food, which were eating meat and wine, would lead to better nutrition and physically fit compared to consumption of vegetables and water. After 10 days, it was observed that those that were consuming vegetable and water seems to be seems to have a better nutrition, better nourishment, if I should say, and also look more better physical fit compared to those that were consuming meat and wine. I'm not saying wine is bad. Please drink your wine. So from the ancient beginning, we had a shift to drug-based treatments today, and thanks to drug-based treatment, we are seeing a lot of improvement in quality of life. And then we have the 18th century, where we decided to set the stage for what is to come in the future. Over the time, we've continued to refine what we do, and then eventually several atrocities led to the establishment of different regulatory and ethical processes. I hope you get to see that by the end of my presentation and get to really appreciate how that come to be. On this slide are two important clinical trials that to me shaped when we look at statistics in clinical trial. How do we refine our results and make sure that they are exactly what we're hoping they will be? The MRC Portland trial, 1943, gave the world if the first look to double-blind clinical trial with the hope of eliminating bias. However, how about those making the selection, right? They can still introduce bias themselves. 3 years later, the MRC streptomycin trial, 1946, gave the world the first true randomized control trial. So whenever you see the different trials come to your table and you see first randomized control trial, there was a reason. And if you want to learn more about this reason, please look at the MRC streptomycin trial. In the interest of time, I will keep it high level. The key learning was that it helped to minimize selection bias and also make sure that we had a balanced group. Though both successful in providing us the methodology for clinical trial, what they lacked was the ethical framework for running clinical trial. Why was ethical framework needed? We'll find out. But first, let's look at some of the ethical standards, the key codes and guidelines that make sure that when we conduct clinical trial, we conduct it with safety in mind. We conduct it with patient in mind. We have 1947, we witnessed the Nuremberg Code, which was the first global ethics framework. 1962, the FDA decided that all trial must have a safety and efficacy proof. 1964, we saw Declaration of Helsinki. 1979, the Belmont Report that helps us to better respect and provide benevolence and justice in clinical trial. Then 1996, with the rise of pharmaceutical, there was a need that if you're conducting clinical trial at different places that will speak the same language, just like in Nigeria today, if you're from the north, you meet someone from the south or east, we speak the pidgin English. So if you don't learn how to speak pidgin English, you may not be included, right, in some of the conversation. So in order for us to participate in clinical trial, it is important that we follow the ICH-GCP guidelines, because this is how we know that we are reporting the right data, and this is how we contribute to the advancement of research. For the next few slides, my aim would be to walk you through some of the experiments that has led to all these milestones I've listed. Not all of them, some of them, sorry. We couldn't cover all of them. So the first one will be the Nazis experiment, a brutal and cruel experiment from my own perspective, an experiment that unveiled profound ethical gaps in research. It was an experiment that was conducted back in the World War II era. Between 1942 and 1945, the Nazis actually thought something different. They believed that they could help their German military even be stronger to combat the war challenges as of the time. So in order to do that, they thought that it's best to use the prisoners at the concentration camp, and they thought it was nice to not even tell them what is going on. The intent of the experiment was to help the German military personnel survive challenging combat conditions, test efficacy of drugs and medical procedures, and also perform all sort of crew tests, all in the name of driving or pursuing a certain belief and selection bleeding. What were these experiments? So the experiments were categorized into 3 buckets: the military survivor study experiment, the drug and treatment testing experiment, the racial ideology experiment. I did my best to shed some light on what went on during each bucket, but I don't think a slide will make it justice. So I encourage everyone to take a look at it. But for instance, within the military survival bucket, they were recreating wartime scenarios to subject individuals and be able to drive research that would enable them to combat that in real war. One was freezing testing, where you have people being immersed in ice water to study hypothermal revival. The drug and treatment testing, infecting subjects with disease just to evaluate them or develop a vaccine. Imagine creating wound on your body just so that an antidote research can be conducted without even asking you about it forcefully. They have the racial ideology experiment. It was quite an atrocity back then. But if you are in Nigeria, if you're complaining about the rain, eventually the sun is very beautiful. You get that, right? So post-World War II, we had the Nuremberg military tribunal, where several series of crimes were brought to justice to the world to see. One of those crimes was the Nuremberg doctor trial, which lasted between 1946 to 1947, where 23 German physicians and scientists were brought to face justice for their act in the Nazi experiment. During this, the defense had argued that there was no human, that the human experiment that was done was not illegal. So as of then, there was no international law guiding this. The court took aware of this and decided during their verdict, to generate a set of 10 principles that we know today as the Nuremberg Code. These are principles that will help provide governance when it comes to medical research internationally. What are those codes? The 10 ethical principles for human experimentations were: voluntary informed consent of participants is very essential. We're not talking about just giving them a paper to sign. We're talking about making sure they know what they're getting into. Making sure they understand what it means for them to consent. Making sure that they know they have the free choice to pull out at any time. Doing it without force. Making sure they understand the nature, duration, and purpose of the experiments, as well as also the risk and the hazards. So, anytime informed consent is not properly administered, you are actually not conducting medical experiments. And your medical experiment is not ethical. I think that's what I wanted to say. So for it to be ethical, for it to be medically ethical in research, you have to make sure you administer this. Experiment must aim at fruitful results for the good of the society. In interest of time, I won't read through all of this. I've listed it here, but let's do a few more. Only qualified personnel may conduct experiment, which is important that we keeping ourselves abreast and up to date so that we make sure that at every time we're qualified. Proper facility and preparation must protect subjects. So you see why we conduct the site selections and visibility, and why we need every site to make sure that they are up to date with everything needed globally to conduct clinical research. Researchers must be ready to terminate the experiment if harm is likely. Very important too. Everything here is quite important. The key thing for me today is that the Nuremberg Code set the guideline and the foundation for other ethical frameworks to come to play. Declaration of Helsinki, the Vermont Report, and the modern good clinical practice as well. However, it didn't come without its own gaps, right? There are a couple of gaps that when you look at the Nuremberg Code and look at how things are practiced today, there are a couple of gaps that needed to be filled. And I just wanted to focus on one. I mean, you can read the rest, but lack of a legal enforceability. It wasn't a formal law, right? We needed a society or a group of individuals that needed to be accountable for this. I say this because this is why we appreciate physicians today for what they've done when it comes to clinical research. That brings us now to the Declaration of Helsinki. So the question was, you had the 10 set principles, ethical principles from the courtroom. How do we make sure that we apply this in our everyday practice? In 1964, Helsinki, Finland, location, the World Medical Association, which is defined as the International Organization of Physicians, decided to take matter into their own hands. They stepped up. Why? Because if you reflect back, the Nazi experiment was done by physicians, so there was a need that the professionals own to what has happened. And this is when the physicians, the World Medical Association, step up and started to come up with a new document to better provide us guidance on how to conduct proper ethical research. And that new document was called the Declaration of Helsinki. And since its adoption, there's been a lot of changes in clinical research, and we have continued to make those changes, update the declaration to reflect those changes. The key thing was that the Declaration of Helsinki shifted clinical research into an area where now we think of patients, right? We think of dignity, safety. We want patients to become an important stakeholder in driving research worldwide. And what are these principles? Or what are the key points? The health and well-being of the research subjects come for the interests of science. Reflecting back, you will see how the interest in the Nazi experiment was personal gain. So we're moving away from that. Participants must be fully informed, again, extrapolating forward from the Nuremberg Code. Now we have independent reviewer appreciation to NREC, HREC for what they do in making sure that they're guiding us. So we don't even have to stress about that, but we need to know what it is. So you have to send it to IRB to make sure that the independent individuals look at this and measure ethically and morally this is the right thing to do. Has to have a scientific benefit. Benefit must outweigh risk. Protect special group of individuals that are not able to speak for themselves. Post-trial access is another good one that I think really resonates with me. I think after you must have contributed to advancing research, you gotta think about them post the trial. Come on, you gotta. So I'm really happy that they have this on here as well. Two of the two ethical codes of principle that I've read are all international guidelines. We haven't had anything about the US. They needed to make a map too, because while all these things were happening, another atrocity was going down in US in the Black community. The Tuskegee syphilis study. I probably butchered that name. I'm sorry. I'm trying. Tuskegee syphilis study. So the Tuskegee syphilis study was a study that ran for 40 years from 1932. The aim of this study was to observe untreated syphilis in 600 Black males intent, it was led by the U.S. Public Health Service. From what I read, the intent was good, but eventually drifted into an ethical no, right? So we always have a good intent, but let's keep that good intent to the end of it. They focused on underserved population and offered them various incentives so that they can participate. The atrocities were many, a lot of deaths and complications, infections spread across wives and children. So, what were some of the missteps of Tuskegee study? Lack of informed consent done properly, I would say. The participants actually thought they were being treated for bad blood, which is a term used to describe having fatigue or weaknesses, not knowing that they actually had syphilis. And the participants were further told that as soon as a treatment was found, that they will have opportunity to participate in getting better. That being said, 1940, treatment was found, but participants were not given any treatment. And then, of course, the exploitation of underserved population. We always see this in Africa so far. There are a lot of mini stories there and there. So we have to make sure we stand up and make sure we're doing the right thing. Ethical blind spots. And again, you have the erosion of trust. The erosion of trust in medical research. This continues to teach today. We have to keep educating. We need to know that we have to win the trust of participants. We want them to be a partner, not just a subject. We want them to be a partner. So we have to make sure they know what they're getting into. And that is another importance of education and informed consent. So why all these atrocities are going on, coupled with the atrocity of the Nazis experiment, the atrocity of anyway, there was a lot of atrocity. I can't remember the one I want to talk about right now, but there was another atrocity, so the Tuskegee and various other ethical failures in clinical research that led to the birth of Belmont's report. I'm looking at time, so I'm trying to make sure that I try and get through everything in timely manner. So with the exposure of the Tuskegee study in 1972, the U.S. Congress passed the Natural Research Act Law, 1974. The research set up a group and empowered them to look at all the atrocity that is going on and come up with a set of principles that will guide research moving forward. 4 years later, 1979, the Belmont Report was published. And what were these principles? Well, so the Belmont Report generated 3 ethical principles: respect for person, again, looking at informed consent and protection of the underserved or vulnerable groups; maximizing benefits and minimizing risk, ensuring that participants' well-being is always at the top; justice, fair distribution of rights, benefits, and burden; and avoid exploitation of disadvantaged groups. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the Belmont Report's highlights. Please take some time and read them in depth, but we can see we are almost still talking about how do we protect individuals participating in clinical research. 1980 saw the rise of pharmaceutical industry. By 1980, with the biotech advancements, the regulatory incentives, the market force, global health crisis, the pharmaceutical industry began rising, and with the ethical frameworks in place, another gap was identified. What was that gap? Well, when you're conducting research, how do you make sure that at every country your research is accepted? Right. So you had Japan had their own rule, Europe had its rule, US had its rule. So we needed to harmonize everything. So in 1990, there was a coming together of the regulatory authority and industrial leaders. By coming together, their goal was to harmonize the technical requirements for drug registration. And in 1996, it gave birth to the ICH-EC's Go Clinical Practice. Whenever you apply Go Clinical Practice in your research, you are upholding not just ethical, but also scientific standard for trial design and conduct, for data recording and reporting, for participants' safety and rights. These are all to when we conduct clinical research that the patient participated are protected worldwide, very critical, right? So that why the sponsor is in a different country, it is the sponsor belief that you're using the ICHGCP. One Africa, one our sites in Nigeria to contribute to the advancement of science. This is how the ICHGCP guideline in everything we do. This guideline made it possible for you and I to today to contribute to sickle cell disease clinical research in various ways, and has laid a foundation for everything ethical and scientific. So it's our gold standard. You know, if you're in sickle cell disease, HU is our gold standard. I hope that is still it. So our gold standard for ethical and scientific trial is ICH GCP. So everyone should really make an effort to know this to the T. Let's say you are sleeping throughout, I hope not. And let's say my voice is not as clear, or that, you know, as I'm speaking, it's not coming out clearly because of I have this deck, this slide deck here for you to it's just a reference. You can just print only this one. That is all. I know in Nigeria it's hard to print. You can just get this, right? And use your Google phone and just get caught up on everyone so you can understand why these things are important in what we do. So I've laid it out for you, and please, if there are some missing ones, feel free to add to yours, as I will also do for mine. In terms of the evaluation of clinical trial, as ethical guidelines strengthened, the structure of clinical trial also became more formalized. Important for you to know the different phases so that as we advance as sponsors, as site selections are occurring at different sites, you'll be able to understand whether you're capable in terms of the capacity you have to perform any of them. So we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Furthermore, we run a CRO at our company. What I'm also seeing is that various sites are struggling to adapt the technology overhaul that we're seeing. You know, we're having a lot of supplementary technologies right now to improve quality of clinical trial. There's a very strong need that every site keep themselves ablaze on technology advancements. Very critical because the site plays a key role in advancement of clinical research. And when you're not performing your job well, when you're not familiar with this technology, it delays study, which sponsors don't appreciate, and may also lead to not being able to follow the guidelines and the protocol deviations and more. And then audit findings become extrovert, a lot, and then you might not be able to participate in future ones. So stay ablaze with that. We have the influence of AI and big data now, please. Very important to keep the reading going. So in summary, informed consent is non-negotiable, and not just give them a paper to sign, make sure they understand. Appreciation of the independent oversight we have, the accountabilities are amazing, the CRS, the CROs, everyone, the ethical, everyone that provide oversight, we need to really appreciate them. Justice, respect, safeguard our participants. I think science is here to stay, and I hope that in time we can generate better science for sickle cell disease and give patients what they need. And in time, patients can become a key stakeholder in clinical research. Thank you all for listening. I hope I made justice to this presentation, and I hope you took something out of it. It's been an honor. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. I can say thank you because while the presentation was going on, Dr. Nando Keke joined the meeting. We were not actually expecting that he will be in the meeting today. He's here. So thank you, Nando Keke, for this presentation. So it's time for Q&A, and it's good that he's here. So initially we were thinking of collating the questions and forwarding us, but here with us. If you have any questions, you can put them in the just raise your hand and you will be given opportunity to ask. So this is time for questions and then answers. Okay, I can see Prof. Nadu's hand is up. Prof, please, you have the floor.
Yeah, wonderful. Nnamdi, thank you so much for making out time, to join this. I know it was a pre-recorded message before, but thank you. And I must say, I have had this ethics training over and over the years, but this is by far the best presentation I have had on this subject. So thank you for making it very clear and making it very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so participants, the floor is open. If you have any questions, please, regarding the presentation, please just, this is the time. I can see some people making requests on the chat. We'll address that before we close. But please, this is the time for questions. Okay, I can see Charles Obiora's hand is up. Please, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, good evening.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Doctor, for that wonderful presentation. And thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited. The presentation has been so informed and wonderfully presented. Interesting. Please, I want to ask, where is the place to inducement in time? Participants might to and in the trial by giving some tips. And then if the participant decides to withdraw, is this supposed to be coerced back into the trial? Thirdly, even if a participant is well informed about these processes, about these laws, how does he get to know that the persons carrying out the researches are in complete agreement with the laws or carrying out the specified guidelines? Thank you very much.
So that is can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
All right. So the best way to answer this question is probably take one after the other. So I think you had quite loaded, and so was just repeating.
Hope you're right. Can you repeat?
And I must say, Dr. Nod is probably she's still the expert on this.